the Agile brand.
Hey there, it's your pal, Bonnie Habian, and welcome to the Worth Knowing podcast. If you like a real-life story that features grit, grace, and a whole lot of gumption, then you're in the right place. Get ready to hear from some courageous women who talk about how pivotal, teachable, aha moments have reshaped their confidence and delivered opportunities they never imagined. It didn't happen by chance, of course. They figured out new, sometimes uncomfortable ways to put themselves out there in a way that shouts, they get it. You'll hear intimate stories with actionable takeaways and some very secret sauce. Because everyone has an important story worth knowing. And you know what? The world needs it, and you deserve it. Hello, friends, and I want you to meet one of my friends. Her name is Lisa Weldon, and Lisa and I met through a book. We both wrote a book, and then we crossed paths promoting them. So I am so happy to have her on because her book is a little different than mine. Hers is a documented pivotal transformation, one that has really landed her in a lot of places and has landed her here today. It's a story, and it's a story that I think has a lot of elements that so many of us can relate to. It's a story of heartbreak. It's a story of reinvention, courage, financial infidelity, which I had never heard that word until you and I had chatted a little bit. And I say a whole lot of grit and tenacity. So I am really happy to have you here today. She ended up, Lisa, making this radical left turn after her world blew up. And she's going to share with us some actionable steps that will absolutely help our friends who are listening to do the same. So I want to get right to it. Lisa, I want our friends here to get to know you right away and feel a little bit of your journey. And I know it's painful, but I also think it is hugely triumphant. So you are a marketer, a designer. You're in the creative field for many years. You put everything on hold to raise 3 beautiful children. I want to learn a little bit about you, a little bit about your earlier years, where you started out, and how your life kind of evolved until that one day we're going to talk about. So share a little bit of your life's journey with us.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. This is so fun. It's such an honor to be on this talk with you. A little bit about myself. Let's see where I start. At birth, I was born an Air Force brat. I started first grade in El Salvador in Central America, speaking Spanish. And I think I counted 6 different schools before I graduated in Mobile, Alabama, where I'm from. And I went to Auburn University, where I got a degree in graphic design, and upon graduation, landed in Birmingham, Alabama, in advertising. And not really knowing much about advertising, it ended up being the dream career. I just loved it. You know, back then, all my friends were getting engaged and getting married in the early 20s, and I was so much more interested in my career, creativity. Yeah. I just loved it. I loved it.
Wow. And, and there's something to be said about really, that's one of the things I tell all women. If you love our people in general, if you love what you do, it's success will come. So I kind of feel the same way as you do. Advertising, marketing, all of that creative stuff just really is something special.
Yeah. At my age, I've been doing it for 50 years and I still find it exciting. It's changed and all that, but I've loved it. But, in that first job, I watched my bosses go to New York and Madison Avenue, and they went up there to shoot their commercials and to work with the world's best photographers and illustrators. And as the peon in the group, I just stood in awe. And I decided early on in my early 20s that before I died, that I was going to work on Madison Avenue, that I was going to live in New York City. And I was in Birmingham for a couple of years. And then the next stepping stone was to Atlanta. And we used to call it New York of the South.
Right.
After 2 years in Birmingham, I moved on up to an ad agency in Atlanta where, I grew and I had budgets big enough a little bit to go to New York here and there. And it was just on my mind. I never made it to New York. Here I am at 70. I never made it to New York, but I found every excuse to go there on vacation from then on. And of course, going there for business, I got to do that a lot more.
Well, it is the city. It's a city that never sleeps. And I have that same affinity for New York too. New York
Right?
City, there is just something. I'm right there with you. I was a born Maryland girl, and I ended up living and working in the New York area. And there is just something magical about that place. So I get it, especially for we creatives.
And so I step off the airplane in LaGuardia and my heart beats harder.
Is that because you're afraid, or is that because you're excited?
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of a little bit shortly after I got to Atlanta, one of the ad agencies I worked with, highly creative group, lost two big accounts and they closed, and all of us were on the street. And by that time I had gotten a little portfolio and had won some pretty good awards. So I started picking up freelance accounts, and it went pretty well. I never really thought I would become an entrepreneur, never even dreamed about it, but there I had to. And I got so busy, I hired a person to help me, and then I hired another person to help me. And at age 30, I found myself where I needed to get office space. And I'll never forget signing that $75,000 3-year commitment.
Wow. That must have been, what year was that?
That would have been in the early 80s.
Okay. That was a big nut. That's a lot of money.
Well, I looked it up the other day. That's equivalent to $250,000. As a 30-year-old, I had no clue what I was doing.
And that was, you know what? And thank goodness. I say the same thing. I look back at some of the things and I'm like, that's because you just didn't know any better. And that's okay. So you end up starting this ad agency, right?
Yeah.
And now, were you married at that time or no?
I got married shortly thereafter. And by this point, I had 5 employees.
Wow.
My husband, Jim, rented one of the office, not rented, but he used one of the offices in the back. And everything was going good. I did get pregnant shortly thereafter and lost that baby.
Sorry.
She was born too early. And but shortly thereafter, my 3-year lease was up for renewal. And I always knew I wanted to be a mother. And at the same time, I loved my career.
Yeah.
I loved my staff.
I understand. Yeah.
I had to make a decision whether to sign another lease, be responsible for 5 people's salaries and welfare, and I was just too scared I'd lose another baby. So I found all my employees other jobs, closed my office. My husband and I moved into the basement of our house where we built 2 little rough offices. And that's where I worked for the next couple of years until I got pregnant again. And I tell everybody it's one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make because I wanted both.
I know. And I know. And when you do have both, you certainly wonder, you feel like you're doing a lot, but can't give 100% to everything. So take me a little bit forward. So you have 3 children eventually, correct?
I have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. And I am still freelancing a little bit on the side, but I'm working probably at 50 or 60%. And this time I've kept the same clients that are easy. They didn't care if I walked in, had spit up on my shirt or had crayons on my presentation boards. They
didn't care.
And these were clients that had smaller budgets, or I didn't get to go to New York and stuff like that. But it was a very comfortable living.
And you had flexibility and things of that sort. So,
Exactly.
So here you raise your children to a certain point. Okay, you stayed home for a certain amount of time or did this freelancing, but then you get to a certain point, which we would call, I guess, midlife or whatever. So you're right, yes. 56, 57. When does things were going well there for a while and then your life changes. So take us to that moment.
Well, let me back up a little bit. I guess it was about 55, 56. My husband was also an entrepreneur. So life, had a lot of ups and downs for us, but we had weathered them. But at about age 56 or 57, there was a paradigm shift in the advertising marketing business. I had been doing newspaper ads, billboards, brochures and stuff like that.
Oh,
And
yeah. That's going. Yeah.
everything was going digital.
Oh, yeah.
And it was such a paradigm shift as an art director. I knew that I had to start keeping up.
You had to brush those skills up. You had to just, yeah.
I looked around and I know you won't be surprised to hear this. I found a school in New York City called the Parsons, the new school, that offered 30-day intensives in the summer. And they were for adults like us. And I could go up there for 30 days and learn how to design websites, learn about social and digital media and all this and everything.
There's like a crash course intensive 30-day. Yeah. We will get you up to speed so you can now be more marketable.
Right. So every November when those catalogs would come, or they came twice, I don't know, whatever, I would go through with my little yellow marker and go, not this one. Yes, this one sounds good. Oh, this one sounds good. And it was like the Sears catalog, a child with a Sears catalog.
The Toys R Us, Christmas toy catalog. I remember those.
Yeah. And my kids were getting more and more independent. They were in high school. One or two of them had already left for college. And I kept, but every year I would throw that thing away because going away for 30 days to New York City and the cost.
Family. And that's tough.
It sounded so irresponsible, It sounded, I felt like I was being greedy. And it was expensive, getting an apartment in New York City for a month.
No, you know how you should be looking at it as an investment, right? And we look at it as greedy. So that's we need to shift that mindset at the time.
That's a woman thing that we saw.
I know. We take care of everybody else, right? I totally get it. So anyhow, so you finally commit to this, or
So in 2011, it was New Year's Eve. We always went to the same party as a family, and I went to my husband. I said, I just can't go to this party, and my family left. I sat at my desk. I reached back in that trash can and pulled that catalog out, and I looked at all those courses, and I went online and I hit enroll.
Awesome.
Well, let me tell you.
I mean, did you panic a little bit, sweat a little bit afterwards?
No, I just didn't tell anybody because at the time my husband had lost a venture that he was doing. There was absolutely no way I could pay even the course fee for this thing, but I hit enroll. Well, I didn't tell anybody because it sounded so foolish. I didn't tell anybody until I attended a women's group. We were doing those visionary boards.
Yeah.
And each one of us stood up to tell what our vision was, vision boards. And I said, I enrolled in a class in New York City. And everybody clapped. It was, I went, oh, no. Now I got to figure out how to follow through. I've made it public. So what I did was I broke the next 6 months because I enrolled 6 months ahead of time. I broke all of the things I had to do into small pieces. I thought, okay, if I save $100 a week, I'll have enough. And, the other thing I did that night, I almost forgot this, is I took a map out of Manhattan and laid it on my wooden drawing board. And I took my X-Acto knife and a ruler and I sliced it right down the middle of it. And then I sliced it 10 ways horizontally until I had 20 pieces. And I said to myself, this may be my only chance to live in New York. This may be only chance to realize my dream. So after class, I'm going to walk one of those pieces per day till I have walked the entire island because this may be my last chance.
Well, okay. So now let's bring our friends up to speed here because you were able to do that, but not anyway in the way that you had first envisioned, correct?
Right.
So, all right. So you've now enrolled. You've told people that this is what you're going to do, but you haven't told your husband yet.
Well, I had told him by that point.
You had by that point. Okay. So now you're like, I'm committed. I put it out there. I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Once I told the group, which was about a week after it happened, I had to come home and tell him. And then I thought, there's just got to be a way. there's just got to be a way for me to do this. So I broke the next 6 months into little steps. Okay, if I'm going to walk the city, I got to get in better shape. So I took a map and said, I'm going to walk this many steps up until my trip. I took my finances. This is how much money I had to raise to pay for all this. I've got to save $100 a week. So I broke it up into weeks. This is some of the basics I need to learn before I go. And I broke that up into little pieces. And I thought, if I can do all these little pieces, the big picture may come together. But if I let the big picture keep staring at the big picture, then I won't be able to, I'll shut down. And, back then there was Facebook and there was Twitter, no Instagram, no TikTok or anything. And so I started putting it on TikTok, and all of my friends became cheerleaders, my accountability partners. And it was great.
All right. So you're excited about this, and then you get some news about this class, correct?
Yeah. Well, about a month before I was supposed to go, I got a phone call from the school registrar, and she said, we're canceling the course due to under enrollment.
Oh, you must have been so disappointed.
Oh, but Bonnie.
Oh, my goodness.
To me, it was a relief because I was nowhere near being able to pay for it.
All right. Okay.
I was relieved, and I didn't want to blame it on me. So I went out to Facebook and I said, well, shoot, they canceled the class. I'm not going to be able to go. And, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I blamed it on them. When I knew I should have blamed it on me, I couldn't afford to do it. Anyway, first my sweet cousin said on Facebook, well, what's plan B? And the next person said, you're going.
We're going to figure out a way that you're going to at least go there and do those 20 pieces, right? So that was kind of the thought, like, all right, let's forget about the class. This was a dream. This was an issue. Yeah, this was not really about the class at all. It became something different.
Yeah, here it was a month before I was supposed to leave, or 2 or 3 weeks before I was supposed to leave. And the only place to stay that I could envision being able to afford is a NYU dorm room that they rent to other people during the summer. But I just couldn't stomach sharing a bathroom with another person, and so I just never dealt with the housing part of it. Well, here, all of a sudden, I realized that I was going to get my tuition back, my deposit back, and that would be enough to rent an Airbnb in New York City. And I thought, I can go. Now, I don't have any extra money. I can't go out to eat fancy places or anything like that. But it's enough money to get an Airbnb in New York. And I found one that day and was going at that point.
Okay, so let me, so your mind is like, okay, now I pivoted, but let's bring in the situation of what happens with your husband. And he comes and shares some news. And I need to understand if that was a pivot to push you in a completely different direction, or to just continue to push you to say, I am really now.
Yeah, it was a Thursday evening, just weeks before I was supposed to go. I was up in the kitchen putting dishes in the dishwasher. And I heard his feet come up the basement steps. And he was walking particularly slowly. And he opened the door and he said, sweetheart, at the tone of his voice, I turned around. I said, what's wrong? I knew something had happened to one of our children. Oh. I mean, I just immediately panicked because I could hear it. He said, our house is going to be auctioned off on the courtroom steps on Tuesday. And this was Thursday night.
How does your mind even process? Like, I can't imagine getting that news and having to get my head around that.
Well, I sort of had an out-of-body experience. All of a sudden, I saw myself I just remember this as clear as day. I saw myself at the head of a mahogany conference room table with my children lined up on one side and my husband on the other.
Yeah.
And I delivered the news that we needed to sell this corporation and it would be to their benefit. And then I flashed, it was my head on somebody else's body, an old haggard woman begging at the courthouse steps, please don't take my house. Please don't take my house. And then, this just happened. I guess when trauma hits you go into another whatever, but those two things happened to me. And then I kind of got myself together. I told him to be out by the next morning. I said, I need for you to be out tomorrow by noon. And I went upstairs. We had a house with porch on the top, and I went up and sat in the rocking chair and just looked out over the city and just.
How long had you lived in that home?
Oh, we were there 20 years.
And how long had you been? How long were you married at that point?
Probably 26.
Okay, so
We've been there 20. Then, well, we were there longer than 20. Yeah, we were married 26, and we bought the house shortly after we were married. So
now you have the loss of your home,
mm-hmm.
and I imagine at this point your husband.
My husband and my third child was within a month of going away to college. So
you still had a child. You still had a child in your. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I knew I had to wake up the next morning and tell the kids. Well, my youngest son was upstairs and he heard it. He had gotten on the phone and already told my kids. Oh, the guilt of not talking to my kids. The guilt. You can just imagine.
Yeah. No, and just so people know, he lost that. You lost the home probably. I am assuming because after reading the book, it was an entrepreneurial venture that didn't go well.
Yeah, he was a very creative entrepreneur, but I have since learned the word financial infidelity, but I have since learned that men feel so responsible for the financial health of their family, especially in my generation. And oftentimes
Valid point.
Yeah. Oftentimes men will lose a job. I've heard several incidences of where men lose a job and they get up and get dressed every morning and leave the house so they don't have to tell their wives. And so the fact that he lost his business is one part. And he had lost 2 previous businesses and we got through it. We talked through it, whatever. But the fact that I was not told until really one business day.
So you have to pack within that amount of time? Like, or do they give you a little time after that?
Well, I called my mother, which was really the last person that I would have ever called, and asked her if she could wire me some money and if she could give me 2 months to get it back to her. And she did. She wired me the money. We saved the house. I went to New York, and when I came back, I packed up. We put it on the market, and we sold it very quickly.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
But your marriage was over at that point.
Our marriage was over at that point.
All right. So you now have to somehow figure out, you didn't have a full-time job at that point. You want to get your skills back up to speed. You all of a sudden pivot and say, okay, I am now going full force ahead. And you have. And that's what I want our audience to listen to, this journey you have now been on since that moment that has brought you to where you are to, I would say, it has released all of your creativity, has probably given you a tremendous amount of autonomy, and you are able to help others by having gone through what you've gone through. So let's talk about that. You now go on this walk, right? And you decide to do what during that walk?
So I get to New York, and every morning I close my eyes and I pick up a piece of the map. And I say, okay, today I'm walking Harlem. Okay, today I'm walking the West Village. And I would take off and walk all day and take pictures and write notes about what I saw and smells that I smelled, or, whatever details. And and I really love details. So I kept a little notebook with me on my walks. And then I would come home, I would take a nap and I would watch online videos on how to, number one, write, how to do a blog, how to how to do Facebook properly. And there's a professional way to do Facebook, and how to hashtag, and how to do all these things, and how to tweet, and then I would implement them. So after I'd finished these lessons, these tutorials, then I would do the day's blog.
So let me ask you, wait a minute. So you weren't really a writer before this? I know you were in advertising, but writing wasn't your thing.
No, I was an art director.
Oh my goodness. So that's something new. I did not realize that you didn't have obviously I would say most likely you've always had a talent. You just didn't know, because you just don't one day wake up and start to write. You developed it.
If you go on my website and you see those 30 days worth of blogs, you will say, yeah, you've learned to write a little better.
That's amazing. So that to me that's a scary thing for some people, like speaking, writing. So good for you.
Not only writing, but what I found on my very first 2 or 3 days, I started writing about deep thoughts on my heart. And again, a child of the 50s and 60s, we didn't talk about dirty laundry. We didn't talk about, really anything that was deep. Everything's pretty and nice and all this and everything. Well, I saw some things and I felt some things, and I was going through some things on my walk. And there were several times that I'd put them in my blog post and then say, ooh, I'm not sure I can hit the publish button. So I'd wait till the next day and I would take them out. About the third or fourth day, I just went, screw this, publish. And you know what? I got more responses to that first honest, from the heart blog post that I learned a huge lesson.
People want to connect. They want to learn. They want to see vulnerability. They want to understand the real you. They don't want to see it filtered. So that's amazing. So, all right. So you start publishing these things regularly, and you get a little bit of a following.
Yeah. And so then while I'm in New York, they used to have meetups, things like that. And I would go to a meetup and I'd learn about video and different things like this. And there was another little class. It was just a 2-hour class on digital media. And I'll never forget, I go up to the building, to the classroom, and I am the oldest person in there by 30 years. I felt like grandma with a bunch of young kids. And we went around the room, and what do you do? I'm in a digital da-da-da. I do digital. I do websites. And I'm like, oh, great. She came to me and she said, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm up here walking the city. And they all went, wow.
They liked that. They thought that was cool.
Yeah. So I got through it. But, I got real used to being the oldest person in the room. And you know what? After that initial fear, it was great. It was
One
great.
day, everybody is the oldest person in the room. My mom used to tell me that, and she's absolutely right. So, all right. So you get through this. When do you decide you're writing this book? Like, when do you say, I'm doing this?
I come back from New York. I pick up everything because all the CEOs and all the people in the C-suite are my age. And everybody that knows this stuff's young, and they don't trust the youngsters. So I walk into a new business pitch and I pick up everything. It was magic. And within 2 years, I have to put together a staff of 3 people, and I'm sailing.
All right. So you're saying you come back after New York and you're an agency again, a small business again. You start a marketing agency.
Freelancing. Yeah, but it just gets bigger and bigger, and I need to get people to help me. So I go back to New York for another conference, a blogging conference. And in this conference, we're around a circle table. There are all these bloggers and one agent. And she goes around the table and, what's your blog about? What's your blog about? She gets to me and I tell her, she said, you got to write a book. And I said, ma'am, I don't write. Well, 2 things you never tell a literary agent. Definitely don't call her ma'am. And don't tell her you don't write. And then I followed it up with, Ma'am, I don't even read that much.
Oh, gosh. Are you friends with this literary agent today? You didn't
No,
keep in
but I
touch.
still have the card
That's
because if she
funny.
looked at me and she handed me her business card and said, well, then get a ghostwriter. Your story needs to be told.
Oh, that's so, wait a minute. Do you know that's such a golden feeling? I mean, how many literary agents, you know how difficult that is, right? To get a book published with
Right,
an actual agent, but that is
right.
just amazing. All right. So go ahead.
I had no idea. At that point, I didn't even think about being a writer. It was a crazy idea. And then I was invited to walk Paris and by a friend. She said, if I get the house, will you walk Paris with me? And so I spent 30 days walking Paris. And then Oprah's network, of course, I was putting it on social media. Oprah's network called me and said, will you come to one of our recordings to offer your help with Cindy Crawford turning 50? And I went, okay, which one of my friends is playing a
You
joke on
thought
me?
it was a joke. Yeah, I'm going to too.
It
Like,
was a
oh,
joke. Yeah,
not
yeah.
funny.
Good
Not
enough. It
funny.
was one of her producers. And then Huffington Post saw it and they said, will you chronicle your walk of Paris? And they published my very first submission on their front page of Living Fearlessly. And things just started happening.
See, but you know what? Let me just say, this is right here is this money shot. You started putting yourself out there.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what I'm saying. When I'm talking about people being worth knowing, it's you have decided and realized that you have more to give in life. And so
Yes.
at an age which was tough, you
Right.
put yourself out there and look at the floodgates opening up that you now have these opportunities of a lifetime.
Right.
Who gets to go on Oprah to tell Cindy
Yep.
Crawford how to age well? I mean,
Right.
it's amazing. So you eventually decide to publish this book.
Yeah. Well, I still was not a good writer, so I hired a writing tutor at this point. At this point, I was making enough money, I could hire a writing tutor.
That's amazing. I had no idea about that part.
Yeah. And when I talk to book clubs, I tell the backstory, and it's just crazy as the book story. But she worked with me for 4 years. And, not being a reader, she had to start from scratch with me. But I wrote my book over 4 or 5 years. And, Bonnie, it was so therapeutic because I started
Yes.
processing what had happened to me and what I needed to do. And I found peace doing it. But I never, ever, ever intended to really publish it because I wasn't really an author.
Yeah, well, we're here talking about the book, and I don't think I've ever said in one, we haven't even said the title of the book, but it is properly named 20 Pieces, A Walk Through Love, Loss, and Midlife. And that is what we've been talking about this entire time. And
Right.
the whole 20-piece analogy, I don't think people really, maybe they're listening now and get it. That's where the book kind of came from.
Right.
But it was much more about walking. To me, it was like this dream came true that you were able to do New York in a way that you've always wanted, but then it helped you transition and almost come back with different glasses of what you were
Right.
going to do with life. So you published the book.
Well, I found a publisher. I signed a contract. He started typesetting the book, putting it all together. And I called him one day and I said, how much would it cost me to break the contract? I'm not sure I can put all this out there. It's a lot in that book. It's a lot of
Raw stuff.
raw stuff.
Yeah.
And I went back and told a good friend of mine what I had done. And she said, Lisa, if it will help one woman, isn't that worth it?
Scary though. You probably didn't sleep sometimes. That's a scary, I understand. I truly do.
Yeah. So when she said that, I thought, absolutely, if I can help one person, if I can help just one person, it's worth it. So book's been put together. I happen to be in New York. I got the first copy from my publisher to approve so he could start the presses running. I told him to go and got an email. He says it's up on Amazon, and the panic starts sitting in. A friend calls and she said, mine just arrived at the front door. more panic, terror starts setting in. And then somebody else says, I've just finished the first chapter. I can't put it down. And Bonnie, again, all I felt like was I was running through the streets buck
Naked.
naked.
Yeah, I know. And we do that as women too. What are they going to think of me? What if they say something bad? What if I said something I shouldn't say? What if they're all talking about me? Who cares anymore?
I mean, and within days, I start getting emails from people that said, "Oh, I had a similar thing."
I know.
I received an 8-page single-spaced letter from a woman who went through a similar thing. I still receive notes or gifts and things like that, and I just received a note to come speak to a group. My life has just blossomed from this book. Now, we all want to be New York Times bestseller. We all want to have our book be a movie and all. It of course, has a pipe dream. But the gifts that have come out of this book have been so much bigger.
I know. And I think, you know what, and that's where I want to say, okay, you have now, I know that you're doing some other work with an organization. If you would tell me just quickly about that. And then I want to get to the points of what advice we can give to people, actionable steps to be and kind of do what you did. So let's give them a little bit of an update of where you are now.
Okay. So I still have a couple of clients. I'm still working at age 71. I'm still working.
You don't look anything like 71. Whatever 71 is supposed to be looking like, you are just, you look wonderful. So go ahead.
Thank you. I still have a wonderful real estate client. And I have just recently, Melissa Gilbert of Little House on the Prairie has somebody on her staff read the book and she invited me to be interviewed. She has started a community of older women and has now hired me, 10 of us, to be trusted prairians. It's called Modern Prairie. And I do content development for that organization and plan events for her. And it's really fun. It's really
crazy.
fun. I'm just having a blast. I do a lot of volunteer work. I love speaking to book clubs. That's my favorite thing because you can actually talk to your readers and get feedback and stuff like that.
No, that's just, you've come full circle.
Yeah. So, quite honestly, I'm looking for my next gig. I feel like you asked me 3 things. Don't ever stop learning.
Oh, so let me go back because these are the 3 things that we want to give takeaways or definitely what are things that you feel have helped you in your process that we need to tell other women to do actionably and that has really kind of fueled your journey post kind of crisis.
I have an open marriage. Now that sounds wild, but Jim and I operated our marriage. I'll take care of this, you take care of that. And we never worked together. You have got to be open with each other about finances, about everything. If you're married, be open with each other. And a lot of people say, you didn't realize that was about to happen?
What? No.
No. And part of the reason is we hadn't learned to talk to each other about hard things or everyday things and everything. So live your life openly with other people, whether you're married, whether you're single and dealing with clients or whatever, even if it's hard, but specifically as a woman, keep your finances within your own reach and I don't mean control them.
Have transparency. You need to have transparency, right? I mean, what would you give in terms of like steps for people, women to really think about to get themselves more comfortable, put themselves out there? What are, to position themselves if they have something bad happen or just to position themselves for success? What are some of the keys do you think are important?
Stay current. So when I was coming along, I would say maybe 50% of women my age stayed at home to raise the children, which I agree is a much harder job than going off to an office every day. But I would say 50% of the women stayed at home. In 2008, we had the housing crisis, and a lot of those women, and they were attorneys, they were accountants, they were highly educated women, had not learned how to do Word or PowerPoint. And they were applying for jobs that were hourly wages.
Okay.
So
never stop learning. Never stop learning.
Never stop learning. And even when you don't have a goal, just never stop learning. It just broke my heart to see some of these powerful women just crumble at that time,
Yeah. Yeah. What else would you say? So, I mean, I agree with you that in that respect, but what are, you had 2-3 things. I would love to hear the other two.
The other thing I would say is be selfish. And I'm saying the word selfish, but I mean self-love. Take care of yourself. We women tend to take care of the kids, take care of the house, take care of the schools, take da-da-da-da. And they may have a chance at the very end of that to take care of themselves. You have to take care of yourself. Whether it's exercise, whether it's mental health, whatever it is, put yourself first and your marriage second, and then the kids. So many of us think we have to give ourselves up for our children.
Uh-huh.
And I heard one time that if you and your husband, or if you as a single mother aren't healthy, nobody below you in the ranks, your children, for instance, are healthy. And this was the first time that I did anything of the sort when I hit that enroll button. It felt selfish. It felt foolish. It felt people are going to make fun of me. They're going to talk about how ridiculous I am. But no, I was taking care of myself by enrolling in this class. And so it's a mindset shift.
Oh, I totally agree. And what was the number 3?
Well, it's keep an open marriage, be financially stable, stay educated, and take care of yourself. So it's 3 or 4.
Okay, I need to ask this. 2 questions I have, and then we're going to have to say goodbye. But what happened to your husband? Where is he now?
So I waited 4 years before I filed for divorce. We loved each other dearly. But I had to continue taking care of myself financially and legally. So I filed for divorce, hardest thing I've ever had to do. Jim and I became friends. We stayed in touch. We celebrated all the birthdays together. He moved to Alabama to be around the kids, and we remained friends and good friends. I even took the manuscript and got his approval on it before I published it.
Amazing.
That's how much I cared about him. And but he passed away from cancer about 3 years ago, and I took him to all of his chemo treatments, and it was hard. It was hard. But we had been apart for 10 years at that point, and I had my life of my own. He had his life of his own, and but I was with him the night he died, and it's still hard to talk about.
Of course. Yeah. Let's go to something happier then as well.
Okay.
Let me ask you this. What do your kids think about this new you and this kind of journey you've taken? How did they say, hey, Ma, this is amazing, or Ma, you were just out of your mind?
I think they sort of think I'm out of my mind, but nothing surprises them at this point. My daughter's now in the same field I am in marketing, and a lot of her friends will say, you have the coolest mom, and she'll just roll her eyes. Yeah, you need to live with her, No, I think all of my kids, I have really good relationship with all 3 of them. And now my sons are beginning to, both of them are together trying to start a new business. And they call me about how to do digital ads. And I said, digital ads, they'll tell you just the numbers, but also they got to be creative, And so I felt useful to them, and I think they still think I know a little something.
No, I think it's wonderful. And I just, I tell so many people about your story just because it's interesting how we met, but it's so motivational for me. And just spending this time with you now has been so incredibly motivational. I think you give so many people hope. You give them encouragement. You give them a real life story of pain, hope, love, loss. And at the end of the day, that's all any of us really wants, is to have a connection with others, learn from them, feel like we can relate, and also, be able to take something away that we can put into action. So for that alone, you've given back so much. And I certainly have enjoyed my time with you here today. So thank you so very much.
This was such an honor. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Worth Knowing. If you'd like to learn more about our guest story or connect with them, you'll find their details in the show notes. Remember, the path to worth knowing is paved with courage and insight. Stay inspired, keep striving, and continue to make a difference. Then, you must make sure to share it with others. Until next time, keep chasing those aha moments, my friends. The ones that deliver results and motivate and teach the world. Worth Knowing is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content.
The Agile brand.